Please stay awake. The house I grew up in was a dark, suffocating place, especially during winter. It felt like the walls held their breath, trapping something sinister in the shadows. There was always a strange, oppressive stillness in the air, and the cellar seemed to hum with something I couldn't explain. At night, I'd lie in bed listening to the groans and creaks that echoed through the old house. I tried to ignore it, to pretend I wasn't scared, because ever since my dad vanished when I was 7, I had to be the strong one for my mom. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, deep in the woods outside a tiny town called Garvin, Indiana. No neighbors, no friends. I was homeschooled, so I didn't even have other kids to talk to. The only person I really connected with was my uncle, Mark. He moved in after my dad left and became this odd mix of an older brother and a father figure. Uncle Mark had a thing for ghost stories, dark, creepy ones that always seemed to stick with you long after you heard them. His favorite was about a creature with black, soulless eyes and twisted limbs, something that hid in your closet and only came out when you were asleep. "Stay awake," he'd say, his voice low and teasing. "Stay awake, or it'll get you." I never forgot that story. No matter how old I got, it clung to me, especially when the house seemed to come alive with strange sounds at night. One evening, I went to bed early. My head was pounding, and the cold in the house seemed to settle deep into my bones. After I turned off the light, the room felt heavier. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it felt alive, pressing in from all sides. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself I was being paranoid. Then I heard it, scratching, soft, deliberate, right above my bed. My heart stopped. I told myself it had to be a branch against the window, but I knew better. There were no trees outside my window. I lay there, frozen, every muscle tense, listening to the scratching. Eventually, it stopped, and I forced myself to close my eyes, praying for sleep to come. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The scratching had stirred something inside me, some deep, primal fear I couldn't explain. That's when I decided to go down to the cellar. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find an explanation, something to prove it was all in my head. The cellar was worse than I remembered. Dust hung thick in the air and cobwebs clung to every surface. As I searched through old boxes, my fingers brushed against something cold. It was a drawing, one I had made as a kid. The sight of it sent a shiver down my spine. The creature I had drawn looked exactly like the one Uncle Mark had described in his story: black eyes, twisted limbs, no mouth. And scrawled at the bottom, in a child's frantic handwriting, were the words, "Please stay awake." I didn't remember drawing it, but holding it in my hands made my stomach turn. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. The house was silent, but not in a peaceful way. It felt like the silence before a storm, tense, waiting. I shifted in bed, and that's when I saw it. Through the window, bathed in the cold moonlight, stood a figure. Its body was too thin, its limbs too long, and its eyes. Those black, hollow eyes stared directly at me. I couldn't move. I watched in horror as it tilted its head as if curious, then darted behind a tree faster than anything I'd ever seen. My heart hammered in my chest as I stumbled out of bed and ran to Uncle Mark's room. I shook him awake, stammering about the thing outside. He grabbed his gun and went to check the yard, but when he came back, he shook his head. "Nothing out there, kiddo," he said, but I could tell he didn't believe his own words. "Probably just an animal. Lock your door, okay?" I nodded, but I knew it wasn't over. The rest of the night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my ears straining for any sound. The tapping started again, slow, insistent. At first, it was barely noticeable, but it grew louder. The tapping turned into scratching, the kind that burrowed into your brain. Then came the pounding, loud, violent, like something trying to break through the window. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing it would stop, and then, just like that, it did. But in the silence that followed, I heard a whisper so close I could feel its cold breath on my skin. "Please stay awake." I shot out of bed, heart racing. I had to find my mom. She had to be safe, but when I opened my door, I froze. There, at the end of the hallway, stood the creature. It was taller than before, its limbs long and grotesque, its eyes fixed on me. And it was holding someone. Uncle Mark's body dangled from its hand, limp and broken. His chest was torn open, and carved into his flesh, deep and jagged, were the words, "Please stay awake." My legs gave out from under me, and I barely managed to crawl to my mother's room. The door creaked as I pushed it open, my heart in my throat. She was on the floor, her body twisted and cold. Blood covered the walls, smeared into the same haunting message. I screamed until my throat was raw, but no one came. When the police arrived, they found me huddled in the corner, covered in blood, my drawing crumpled in my fist. I tried to tell them what I had seen, but they didn't believe me. How could they? Now, I'm locked away, alone. They say I'm safe here, but I know better. The tapping has started again. It's louder this time, more insistent. It's raining tonight, harder than usual. And I can hear it something at my window, whispering to me. Please, stay. Awake. Please like and follow.